I live in a town like that. That's like Baroque. English. German! Seitdem ich hier im Hotel bin. Fuck, ich bleib ein Sünder, zahllos sind die Gründe dafür. Soll doch meine Seele brennen, damit ich mal was spür. Ich bin süchtig nach dem Rausch, der mich dorthin trägt, wo ich gern wär. Reiß mich nie aus meinem Fieber in die Realität. Lass dir von den Wolken zeigen, wie dein Leben vergeht. Brazilian. Brazilian Portuguese. Let's hope Ray doesn't kill ya. I've been to Brazil 3 times.
Tiene cura y me conduce a la locura. Que no acabe el festival del vicio y el frenesí, porque en este puto infierno estamos.
Spain, Spanish. European Spanish. Spain.
Me emociona y me excita. Que te caos desenfrenado nunca llegue a su fin. Solo pienses y libera lo peor que hay en ti.
French, France. Who Truxton did this song?
Jamais on ne pourra s'empêcher de s'embourber. Laisse-moi brûler mon âme pour que je puisse la respirer. Je suis addict aux sensations qui font grimper jusqu'au plafond. On veut juste continuer pour
I need to do working those right now. Italian.
La locura es, y esto del un gran paraíso es, donde siempre habrá una puta manera de pecar. Deja que mi alma arde y pueda respirar. Mi gran adicción se siente en verdad y muy alta es, que hasta el cielo va. No voy
Mexican,
a
Mexico.
esta puta sensación. Suelta tu demonio interno ya por esta ocasión. Dependeți de plăcere.
Romanian.
Acest hotel eu mângâiere. Vom găsi mereu motivul pentru a păcătui. Îmi las sufletul să ard, așa mă voi încălzi. Dependeți de nebunie, așa ne umplem de iubire. Aș vrea ca acest moment să fie la infinit. Așa că lasă-ți demoniul să-ți fie de ghid. Atomarmi, neontalim, hotel dalmim, s nemiesalim, tak proč
Just say, when did you get 700? I don't know. Let's look at later.
naše žichy měly by zpět, duši záhadnou na popel spal a nadech mi zpět, pocit.
I put it in my book here. I know it was put down 4.
Doesn't matter if the dates don't match up, do they? Technically, it doesn't matter if they don't match up or not, but the thing that matters is that part of the things are in this date. Stuff in here is just for me. So 4/14. 4/4/14. Let's do that then. What's the date? 4/4/14. 4/14. There we go, that's close enough. There we go. Now it's all situated. Okay, now I can be actually uploaded to now I can actually be where I need to be at now. Cock-a-doodle-doo, we are a piece of shit. I'm gonna work on something else now. I just need to figure out what was it a binder I wrote it in, or was it a book I wrote it in? I forget. I'm looking for that's train stuff. That's cities, okay. Must be a binder or something, and I wrote it in because I can't find it. Oh, I still have these in plastic still? Okay, those things haven't touched since I went to college. This can stay out, but I need to put that over there because that's train stuff. A book of cities. Well, must have been the green book I was writing it in because I can't find it. I'm gonna rewrite. I have to type the book later on today, but okay, that's all I wanted to make sure. Wait, this right here. Oh, these are roads. Oh, these are roads you're gonna use, right? Don't need this. Changed my mind last minute. I was working on that, changed my mind the last minute, so I'm gonna delete that right there, put that here, and put this here. Garrett, kill yourself. Garrett's gonna love you when he finds out you wanna. Too bad some of the stuff I wanna do, Garrett. Well, Garrett, think of it right now, John. Think right now, you'd be dead. Come on, could be. Czech Republic. Czech Republic. Czech Republic. Fuck it. Polish. I wish I could speak Polish. What you're using? Remember. Are you going to do anything? Yeah, I'll keep my ass tomorrow. Where's the dick at? Where's the dick at? Where's the dick at? That doesn't work. That doesn't work. I'll do that a little bit.
Стал отелем Атлантидой. Но причину, что грешить, найдем легко, не спеша. Дым вдыхаем мы, пока дотла сгорает душа. Одержимы, обжигаем выше неба. Мы взлетаем этим чувством офигенным, пусть не будет конца. Мы уступим своим демонам до волю сердцам. Поныло, Божий виля.
Ukrainian.
Атлантида, бо ти грішниками є чимало клятих причин. Хай душа горить у полум'ї, вдихатиму дим. Понило, мов на крилах, вихлетіти, кайф зловивши. Стало просто необхідним саме це відчуття. Присвячив демонів саме час. А ті, хто його kuulostaa paratiisista hotellison. Ei me saatana oo syytä olla sinnittäviä. Ammo sielun pala, ei sitä oo kuolemaki. Addiktoiva, tunnetaan, korkeal nousta, taivaissa on. Eikä saatanata tunne koskaan lopussa. Luovuttaa täs valloillesi simpäs demonikkaa.
Gex. Geo Gex. Hungry. Louisiana, I'll do that then. Yeah, those are the presidents. Oh yeah, because yeah, couldn't I? Korea.
우린 영원히 저를 지을 이유가 있어 내 영혼을 태워 그 향기도 들은 시계 난 중독됐어 지금 이 느낌 정말 끝내줘 날아오르게 좀 같은 이 환상 속에 살길 원한다면 그건 네 안내 악마를 받아들이면 돼
Thailand. Okay, I'm down with this. Okay, now with that, now I'm gonna do something else now. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna do the presidents on here. Then I'll do animals. YouTube presidents. Yeah, Mr. Beast on president, that'd be funny as hell.
I'm Mr. Beats, and
Edison?
one day
Yeah, we'll do Edison.
will die. Heck, one day all of us will die.
Thomas Edison.
Likely. But the good news is that right now we're all alive, so congratulations to all of us for that. That said, if you're watching
Thomas
right now,
Edison.
you're dead, please comment below.
According to
I wanna hear
Wikipedia,
from
Thomas
you.
Alva Edison was
You're
an
not
American
dead to
inventor
me.
and businessman.
Anyway, I'm YouTube's American Presidents guy now, apparently. So breaking news, 39 different American presidents have died. Now, some
Oh,
of them
he
have been
died?
dead for a long time.
That's quite
Still,
old, wasn't
in
he?
this video, we are going to look at how every president in American history died. I would argue that being
Then,
president
look, Louisiana.
is the most dangerous job
Look,
in the
Louisiana.
world. 18% of them have died while on the job. 9%
Next
of them
week,
were
this one's gonna be for-
assassinated. In fact, there was a period of about 122 years in which 8 presidents died while in office. Now, you could say that presidents generally tend to be older when they take office, and that's a fair point. Still, it's no wonder that the president now has an entire Secret Service team of thousands to protect them. Oh, and an entire White House medical unit to take care of of all of their medical needs. It's a dangerous and stressful job. I mean, just look at these before and after photos. While most of us hope for painless deaths, you know, like dying in our sleep, tragically, many American presidents died horrible, extremely painful deaths. Oh, and while we're at it, we might as well look at the last words of every president, even if sometimes those last words were, like, totally not profound at all. And let's go in chronological order based on when they died, not when they were actually in office, to mix it up a bit. But yeah, George Washington, our first president, was indeed our first president to die. He likely died of epiglottitis, which is the inflammation of the epiglottis, or that little flap thingy at the base of the tongue that prevents food from getting into your windpipe. The doctors who treated him didn't quite know what it was, though, and just tried bloodletting. He ended up losing around 40% of his blood before he died. He was 67, and his last words were, "'Tis well." The second president to die was Thomas Jefferson. The third president to die was John Adams, the second president. And crazy thing, they both died on the exact same day, which was July 4th, 1826, which was the 50th anniversary of the country, and also the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which they both worked on. The two had a close friendship that went back to when they both led in the Continental Congress during the American Revolution. That said, later on, they were bitter political rivals for a while. In their later years, they once again became besties and brothers with each other regularly. Jefferson apparently had a slow, painful death, and was bedridden for his final months. What officially caused his death was really bad infections in his bloodstream. I mean, apparently he had urine in his blood related to having severe kidney damage. On top of that, he had pneumonia. His last words were, "No, doctor, nothing more." Although before that, he had supposedly said, "This is the fourth." John Adams apparently died of heart failure, and his death was more sudden than Jefferson's. Unaware that Jefferson had died just hours before him, his last words included, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Jefferson was 83 and Adams was 90. The fourth president to die also died on July 4th. No joke, princess. James Monroe, the fifth president, died from tuberculosis and heart failure exactly 5 years after Jefferson and Adams. He was 73. His last words referred to his good friend, James Madison, the fourth president. They supposedly were, "I regret that I should leave this world without again beholding him." There's no solid evidence he ever said that, though. Madison was the next president to die, dying almost 5 years after Monroe on June 28th, 1836. He almost died on July 4th, too, and his doctors actually tried to get him to take stimulants to prolong his life until then. Anyway, he also died of heart failure. He was 85. Before he died, one of his nieces asked him what was wrong. He supposedly replied, "Nothing more than a change of mind, my dear. I always talk better lying down." So yeah, those are his last words. William Henry Harrison, the sixth president to die, was the first to die in office. Just a month into his presidency, he was 68. It's a common misconception that he caught a cold that turned into pneumonia after giving a really long speech at his inauguration after refusing to wear a jacket in chilly weather. Well, he did give a 2-hour speech at his inauguration, and he did not wear a jacket on a chilly day. However, he didn't get sick until more than 3 weeks later. And yes, the official cause of his death was pneumonia. However, 173 years later, experts argued that he actually caught typhoid from bacteria in the water supply. His last words were, "Sir, I wish you to understand the true principles of the government. I wish them carried out. I ask nothing more." Andrew Jackson was the next president to die. He had survived so much crazy stuff his entire life, but ultimately his heart failed him on June 8th, 1845. He was 78. At the time of his death, he also suffered from edema, which is the buildup of fluid in the body's tissue. On his deathbed, after reacting to his family crying around him, his last words were, "What is the matter with my dear children? Have I alarmed you? Oh, do not cry. Be good children, and we will will all meet in heaven. 3 years later, the 6th president, John Quincy Adams, died from a stroke at the age of 80. He had worked in Congress up until his death, and his last words were, "This is the last of earth. I am content." Future President Abraham Lincoln was there when he died. James Polk died far too young. He was only 53 when he died from cholera, likely from drinking contaminated water. He died just over 3 months after he left office. It was crazy to see how quickly his health deteriorated because as president he was energetic and passionate. He died with his wife Sarah at his side, and his last words were, "I love you, Sarah, for all eternity. I love you." Next was Zachary Taylor, who was the 2nd president to die while in office, less than a year and a half after swearing in. He died from gastroenteritis, or inflammation of the gastrointestinal tract. Us Americans call it the stomach flu for some reason. It must have been painful for him. It's worth noting that there were theories that he may have been poisoned, but analysis of his remains in 1991 could find no proof of that. Still, some historians think it's a possibility. Taylor's last words were, "I am about to die. I expect the summons very soon. I have tried to discharge all my duties faithfully. I regret nothing. But I am sorry that I am about to leave my friends." 2 former presidents died in 1862 at the height of the American Civil War. A Yankee and a rebel. First, the 10th president, John Tyler, in January, and later the 8th president, Martin Van Buren, in July. No, not July 4th. Tyler died from a stroke. He was 71. Shortly before he died, he took a sip of brandy and told his doctor, "I am going." The doctor replied, "I hope not, sir." Tyler then responded, "Perhaps it is best." Those were his last words. He's the only president to be buried with a Confederate flag instead of an American flag, by the way. Van Buren died from heart failure brought on by bronchial asthma. He was 79 and had lived to see 8 more presidents succeed him in the office after he left it. That's still the record, although if Jimmy Carter sticks around a few more years. Supposedly his last words were, "There is but one reliance." The next president to die was the first assassinated in office. When Abraham Lincoln and his wife and friends were watching a show at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., John Wilkes Booth came up behind Lincoln, who was laughing hysterically in reaction to the show, and shot him in the head at point-blank range. After going into a coma for 8 hours, Lincoln died the next morning. He was 56. I have an entire video about the assassination if you've got some extra time to watch. We don't know his last words for sure, but one account says they were, "She won't think anything about it." That was a response to Mary, Lincoln's wife, after she asked him what Miss Harris, one of their friends sitting next to them, would think of her hanging on to him so much. 3 years later, James Dean died from both respiratory failure and rheumatic gout. He was 77. Some say his last words were, "O Lord God Almighty, as thou wilt." But honestly, I'm not that convinced they were. Seems a little too dramatic for me. Just saying. Franklin Pierce died the next year from inflammation of the stomach. He had been suffering from liver cirrhosis for several years, yet had drunk alcohol heavily anyway. So yeah, basically, alcohol killed him. I've covered on this channel before how tragic his life was, and it's even the chorus of this song I made about him.
The tragic life of a dolphin.
But let's add to the tragedy, shall we? He died alone, with no family members present, and that's why we don't know his last words. We do know he was 64 when he died. Millard Fillmore was next. He died from a stroke at the age of 74. His last words supposedly were, "The nourishment is palatable," referring to a bowl of soup he had just finished. Even though I doubt these were his last words, it's fun to pretend they were. The next year, Andrew Johnson also died from a stroke. He was 66 and was still an active U.S. Senator representing Tennessee at the time. Also at the time, he was the only surviving past president. Yeah, you can agree about what his last words were, so I'm not gonna speculate on this one. James Garfield was the second president to be assassinated while in office. However, if he had competent doctors, perhaps he would have survived. Just 4 months into his presidency, a mentally ill fellow named Charles Guiteau came up to Garfield and shot him twice, once in the back and once in the arm. My God, what is this? Garfield shouted after. That will not be his last words. Most people don't know that after he was shot, Garfield was slowly actually starting to recover before his doctors screwed things up. While trying to get his bullets out with unsterilized fingers and tools, they caused a severe infection. 2 months after getting shot, Garfield died from septic shock. His last words were to his friend, General David Swaim. Clutching the tremendous pain in his chest, he said, "Oh, Swaim, can't you stop this? Oh, Swaim." It must have been a painful death indeed. He was just 49. Ulysses Grant also had a slow, painful death. At 63, he died from throat cancer after suffering from it for at least a year. His last words, or the word, was water. The next year, Chester Arthur died from a stroke at the age of 57. We don't know his last words. The next president to die was Rutherford Hayes. After suffering from a heart attack, he died from heart disease at the age of 70. His last words were, "I know that I'm going where Lucy is." By the way, Lucy was his beloved wife. Now, where was she? Well, frankly, I think she was in the bathroom. Oh, wait, what's that? Oh, heaven! Hayes thought she went to heaven, so he was going there too. I see. Benjamin Harrison was next. He got influenza, which then turned into pneumonia. He died from it at the age of 67. Now, his last words make sense to me. They were, "Are the doctors here? Doctor, my lungs. Yeah, pneumonia sucks." The next president to die was the third one to be assassinated while in office. That'd be William McKinley. After serving as president for 4.5 years, a zealot named Leon Czolgosz shot him twice in the stomach. Czolgosz thought McKinley was a symbol of oppression and government bad and stuff. McKinley appeared to be recovering in the days following the shooting, but then took a turn for the worse. He ended up dying from gangrene, a severe type of tissue death caused by a lack of blood supply. Do me a favor and don't Google pictures of it. You just did, didn't you? Anyway, his last words were, we are all going, God's will be done, not ours." He was responding to his wife Ida, who had said, "I want to go too." 7 years later, Grover Cleveland, the 22nd and 24th president, was the 24th president to pass away. He suffered from a heart attack and died at the age of 71. He had ongoing health problems, suffering from coronary sclerosis and intestinal obstruction. His last words were, "I have tried so hard to do right." Me too, Grover. Me too. Teddy Roosevelt was next. His death was a bit of a shocker, to be honest. On the night of January 5th, 1919, he had been struggling to breathe. He saw his doctor, who gave him some kind of treatment, and after that, Roosevelt felt better and then went to bed. However, he never woke up. He died in his sleep, which is why his last words were, "Please put out that light, James," which he had spoken to his family's servant, James Amos, before he drifted off. The vice president at the time, Thomas Marshall, famously said, "Death had to take Roosevelt sleeping, or if he had been awake, there would have been a fight." It's assumed he died from a coronary occlusion caused by a blood clot. He was just 60. Warren Harding was the 6th president to die in office, but 3rd to die in office of natural causes. When he was traveling along the West Coast, he suddenly experienced severe stomach and chest pains. After some rest, he began to recover and traveled down to San Francisco. But down there, he began to feel like crap again and became bedridden at the Palace Hotel. On August 2nd, 1923, his wife, Florence, was reading a flattering article about him from the Saturday Evening Post. After she paused, he told her, "That's good, go on, read some more." Those were his last words, as he had a dramatic heart attack right afterward. He died at the age of 57, just less than 2.5 years into his presidency. Woodrow Wilson died just a few months after Harding of a stroke, although he had already suffered from a severe stroke a few years before when he was president that nearly killed him then. In fact, afterward, he was partially paralyzed and nearly blind because of it. Supposedly, his last words were, "When the machinery is broken, I am ready." He was 67. Today, he's the only president buried within Washington, D.C. Next to die was William Taft. Taft is known as the heaviest president in American history, but in his final years, he made a significant effort to get in shape, exercising regularly and eating healthier foods to lose around 100 pounds. He also worked right up until right before he died as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. However, his health had declined beginning in the late 1920s. He died of inflammation of the liver and heart disease when he was 72. We don't know his last words. Calvin Coolidge died of a heart attack at the age of 60. His death was sudden and unexpected. Apparently his last words were, "Good morning, Robert." Robert was a carpenter who had been working on his house. Franklin Roosevelt was the 7th president to die in office, but that was after he had been re-elected a 4th time. When he died at the age of 63, supposedly from a stroke, he had been in office for more than 12 years. Now I say, quote, supposedly, since some historians argued the real cause was melanoma, a type of skin cancer. His last words apparently were, "I have a terrific headache." Next to die was John F. Kennedy, the most recent president to die in office and 4th assassinated. His death is arguably the most famous death of all the presidents, and right now you can search online and see footage of it. He died from gunshot wounds, and it was dramatic. In front of what seemed like the entire world as he paraded through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963. Now, we're not going to get into all the theories about who really killed JFK, but according to the Warren Commission and most historians, undoubtedly the main dude responsible was Lee Harvey Oswald, who was murdered himself just 3 days later. Public opinion polls have demonstrated that most Americans still don't believe the official version tells the whole truth about what really went down with JFK's death. His last words were, "No, you certainly can't." He was responding to Nellie Connolly, the wife of then Texas Governor John Connolly. She had said before that, "You certainly can't say that the people of Dallas haven't given you a nice welcome, Mr. President." At age 46, John F. Kennedy was the youngest president to die in American history. Herbert Hoover died the next year. He had gone through several health problems the last couple years of his life, but the official cause of his death was massive internal bleeding. We don't know his last words, but he did live to the old age of 90. A pretty good run there, Hoover. The Grim Reaper's next visit was to Dwight D. Eisenhower's house. He died from heart failure at the age of 78. He had had heart problems for a while and famously suffered from a heart attack while he was president. His last words were supposedly, "I want to go. God, take me." Harry Truman was the next to die. His organs had failed and his blood pressure went extremely low after suffering from severe pneumonia. He was 88. We don't know his last words. Lyndon Johnson died less than a month after Truman, despite not first serving as president until 10 years after Truman left office. LBJ, who smoked heavily for much of his adult life, died from a heart attack at the age of 64. His last words were, "Send Mike immediately." Mike was a Secret Service agent who was assigned to his Texas ranch. By the time Mike arrived, Johnson was already dead. The next president wouldn't die until more than 21 years later. That would be Richard Nixon, who died from a stroke at the age of 81. His last word makes a lot of sense. It was help. Ronald Reagan was the next president to die, dying from pneumonia after long struggling with Alzheimer's disease, which he was first diagnosed with in 1994. As horrible as Alzheimer's disease is, remember, Reagan nearly became the 5th president assassinated while in office, but survived a gunshot wound back in 1981. We don't know Reagan's last words, but he was 93. 2 years later, Gerald Ford died officially of arteriosclerotic cerebrovascular disease, and diffuse arteriosclerosis. Okay, look, he had heart issues, okay? He was also 93, and we also don't know his last words. And finally, the most recent president to die was George H.W. Bush, who died of Parkinson's disease on November 30th, 2018. He was 94, at the time the longest-lived American president, but that distinction is now held by Jimmy Carter. Bush's son, George W. Bush, who himself was a president, reported that his dad's last words were, "I love you too." In conclusion, you may have noticed that most American presidents have lived rather long lives. Even though it's supposedly the most dangerous job in the United States, presidents have historically lived longer than the average American. The average lifespan for Americans is currently 78.9, but in 1860 it was just 39.4, due to so many children dying back then. The average lifespan for all 39 American presidents who have died is 71.1, but remember that goes back to 1797. 24 of the 35 presidents who died of natural causes lived longer than the average life expectancy of their time. If you just look at presidents who have died over the past 50 years, the average lifespan number for presidents goes up to 85.5. Plus, look at the 6 presidents who are still alive. They're old, man. Especially the aforementioned Jimmy Carter, who is currently 97 years young. And then there's the current president, Joe Biden. The moment he was sworn into office, he was already the oldest president in American history. He recently turned 79, and yep, he's already expressed interest in running for re-election, even though he'll be 82 when that happens. Anyway, that's how every president died. Congratulations for staying alive throughout this whole video. And remember, most presidents die because of heart failure or strokes. So watch that blood pressure. And don't forget to buckle your safety harnesses. This video is sponsored in parts by Warby Parker. Don't let your FSA or HSA dollars go to waste. Put them to good use on Warby Parker. Prescription glasses. Warby Parker prescription glasses, or prescription sunglasses, contact lenses, and eye exams even. Warby Parker is committed to providing exceptional vision care online and in stores, offering eyeglasses, sunglasses, eye exams, and contact lenses. Glasses start at $95, including prescription lenses. Now the fun parts. We're going to unbox. Now you may know that I wear glasses because you've watched me before in videos, and you might be thinking, oh, maybe Mr. Beat needs to get some new glasses. So yeah, I got some new glasses from Warby Parker. We're going to check them out now. I picked out 5 online and they shipped this to me. Today we're going to choose which one. Actually, that's why Mrs. Beat is here, because I'm going to see which one she approves of on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being the best.
5.
Wow, this is going to be rough. Okay. Remember, I picked these out ahead of time, so apparently this is in style. That's what the kids are doing. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, I don't know about that one.
Okay.
Oh, this one feels the best.
It's not high like the other one. I like this one. 10.
Really?
Yeah, I like that one.
What would you rank it?
Let me think about it.
Now these are, these are different. Okay.
Turn to the side. Oh, I like those though. 9.5 to 10.
Okay.
I like those.
So we have, it's going to be between these two. Try 5 pairs of glasses at home for free at warbyparker.com/MrBeat. Well, the glasses I chose were those last ones. So, let me know if you disagreed with my choice in the comments. Also, which president videos should I make next? It's time to recognize my Patreon supporters for their support. Here's my monthly shout out to every Patreon supporter who donates at least $15 or more each month to my channel. Alphabetically starting with my biggest donors at the George Washington level: Alexander Major, Alicia Solberg, Andrew B., Anthony Beckett, Austin Ciros, Brady Barkwell, Corey Ryman, Dr. Paul J. Lilly, Elijah Ellis, Josie Ramsey, Kyle Fassbinder, Matt Standish, Neo R14, Nick Everett, Osbers Gaming, Pat Iapicca, Sean Connett, Thomas, and William Roush. At the Dwight Eisenhower level, Adam Christians, Aesthetic Degan, Andrew Snyder, Brian Layton, Christian Ojeda, Empty Machine, Gail Gerard, Grant Hughes, Ian Driscoll, Elon Capone, Jack L., Jacob Birnbaum, Joel Serrano Lozada, John Johnson, Kit Walker, Lee Fortier, Naderade, Nelson Guzman, Robert Reichel, Samuel Striz, Thomas Oppenheim, Victor Martinez, Waterfort, and Zachary F. Parker. Thank you all, and thank you for watching. You're still watching. Whoa. What is it? I'm Mr. Beat. At this point, I've managed to accomplish making a lot of videos about all of the American presidents. I've made videos about their pets, their kids, their wealth, their religion, their education, even their favorite food and music. But one thing I haven't accomplished yet is just straight up looking at their accomplishments. What did they get done while in office that had the greatest impact? Well, in this video, we are going to look at the biggest accomplishment of every American president while they were in office. But first, here's a word from our sponsor. What is it? Mr. Beat. I am. The fastest growing crime in the United States is identity theft. Most of you didn't guess that, did you? In fact, there's a new victim of it every 14 seconds. Well, this video is sponsored in part by Aura. Aura is identity theft protection, fraud monitoring, a VPN, password management, and antivirus software all combined into one easy-to-use app. Aura scans the dark web for your emails, passwords, and social security numbers and sends alerts fast, right to your phone and email. And guess what? Aura found my personal information on the dark web 31 times.
Okay, how do you say it again?
31 times! Holy crap.
Okay.
Protect you and your family from the country's fastest growing crime. Try out Aura for free for 2 weeks by going to the special link in the description of this video. Try it out like I did to see if your personal information or your family's personal information has been compromised.
Good.
Maybe it's out there like mine was on the dark web. Goodness.
You just told it in front of yeah, well, guess what? You're going to jail then.
Alright.
Because you just threatened
you remember
because you just threatened a
this
minor.
was all about, Precious, don't you?
Yeah,
it's
guess
about
what?
The biggest
You just do two
accomplishment
things you
of
don't
every
do.
American
What?
president
One, you
while
threatened a
in
minor, and
office.
two, a cop has heard you say that.
What does biggest accomplishment mean? Well, it basically just means the one thing
Yeah,
they
you
did
told it to a
while
sheriff.
they were
Yeah,
in
well, you
office
told it
that
to a
had
sheriff.
the greatest
So you're gonna
positive
get- yeah, you
impact
told it to
on
the
the
sheriff.
greatest number of people. And when I say, quote, greatest positive impact on the greatest number of people, I say it with my historian hat on, looking at all of American history. Now,
Yeah,
this is
well,
something
guess
they
what?
accomplished while in office.
Please, girl,
so,
look, fine. You know what?
sorry,
The
William.
cop right now is coming. He's getting his cruiser right now and
Jeez,
coming to
what
your
am I
house and
gonna
beat
say
you
for
up.
William Henry Harrison. Bruh.
Oh yeah?
Ah!
What are you going to say about Andrew Johnson?
Oh, hey, Mr. Terry. What was that?
Oh, hey, Mr. B. Sorry, I thought you knew I was watching you. So, what are you going to say about Andrew Johnson?
Oh, geez. What am I going to say for Andrew Johnson? Well, you'll all just have to find out, okay? Well, feel free to jump
Yeah,
in
someone
if
like
you
me
disagree
would-
with me on any of these, okay?
Yeah, the best
Are
part
you
is
sure?
you could
I
have
kind of
seen
feel bad for interrupting you already.
because
Oh,
one,
don't feel bad.
no, listen,
I'll
yeah, you're not
pee
gonna
my
have to.
pants a little bit. Seriously, though, my
Really, you're
audience
good.
would
You're
love
killing a minor.
to hear your
You're killing.
expertise on this.
Listen,
So,
let's press like Kristen one.
Right,
That is
audience?
now right now serving 25
Right
life
on.
in prison.
Let's do
Young
this.
girl.
here is the biggest accomplishment for every American president in history while they were in office, in my opinion.
I have
In my
friends and
opinion,
time will
yes,
places
of
that
course,
will
in
make
our
you wake
opinion.
up in the hospital, so don't try it.
Curtain, please. Curtain. George Washington. The greatest accomplishment of Washington was making it clear what the role of the president was. Sure, the U.S. Constitution laid it all out, but you know how people can interpret that differently and stuff. Washington made it clear that he, as president, was not only the head of state, but also the commander-in-chief in charge of all the armed forces. Not just the armed forces, in fact. He was also in charge of all of the executive branch. Additionally, while he couldn't pass new laws, he certainly influenced Congress into passing new laws, as well as vetoing two he didn't like. Washington also made sure the president, as head of state, was the lead spokesperson for the entire country. Even more specifically, though, the greatest thing that he did while in office was quit. Yep. He made it clear that he didn't want to be a king. And he voluntarily resigned, or retired, at the end of the second term, and thus set a standard for all future American presidents who came after him. John Adams. Although there's a strong case to make that appointing John Marshall to the Supreme Court was the most impactful, positive thing Adams did while president, I'm actually going to go with the Convention of 1800 instead, which ended the quasi-war and healed relations between the United States and France. In fact, without John Adams' biggest accomplishment, Thomas Jefferson's biggest accomplishment wouldn't even exist. Thomas Jefferson. You've probably already guessed this one, but Jefferson's biggest accomplishment was the Louisiana Purchase. As unconstitutional as it maybe was, for just $15 million, Jefferson was able to nearly double the size of the country and dramatically increased the country's power over the continent. While it had a positive impact long-term for many Americans, it is also important to recognize that it came at a great cost for tens of thousands of Native Americans. James Madison. Madison's significance to the United States is much greater as a founding father, but as president, he honestly didn't have that many accomplishments. Still, holding Great Britain back during the War of 1812 easily is his biggest accomplishment in my opinion. The Americans were huge underdogs in that war, and surviving the British threat indeed felt like a second war of independence and led to sweeping patriotism and unity across the country.
What about James Madison being the chief author of the Constitution? That's gotta be worth something.
Well, that was way before he was president.
Also, being the shortest president ever at 5'4", that's an accomplishment?
Yeah, he was short. James Monroe. Well, Monroe did sign the Missouri Compromise, which held the country together despite its differences over slavery for the next 30 years, but I think Monroe's biggest accomplishment was no law he signed, but just a bunch of words he said. The Monroe Doctrine, baby! The Monroe Doctrine was basically a set of foreign policy principles that said that any intervention in the political affairs of the Americas for foreign powers, okay, mostly Europe, would be seen as a hostile act. In other words, you mess with me and my neighbors to the south, we will come after you, my friend. Most historians say the Monroe Doctrine is a defining moment in the history of American foreign policy, and it would heavily influence the foreign policy of many presidents who came after him.
So his greatest achievement is intimidating foreign countries. How American?
How American indeed. John Quincy Adams. Infrastructure, FTW. Adams was greatly influential through his ambitious infrastructure projects to keep the country connected, in particular presiding over big repairs and further construction on the National Road and the creation of a bunch of new canals. Andrew Jackson. Jackson is the only president in American history to pay off the national debt. When he first took office, the national debt was $58 million. 6 years later, he was able to limit the spending of Congress so much that it was down to zero, and there was a surplus. So what did Jackson do with all the extra money that came in? Well, he divided it evenly between the states, of course. Martin Van Buren. Van Buren helped in the Aroostook War between settlers of Maine and New Brunswick. Bet you didn't know that, did you? Huh?
And those mutton chops.
Mm-hmm. William Henry Harrison. Oh, geez, here it is. Well, his biggest accomplishment as president for those 31 days was his great inauguration speech, the one in which he famously wore no coat and spoke longer than any other president at their inauguration in history. Oh, I know. Appointing Daniel Webster as Secretary of State. That was an excellent choice. Ooh. John Tyler. I would say Tyler's biggest accomplishment was the annexation of Texas. He was a big reason why Texas joined the United States. And remember, it was an independent country at the time it did so. A shout out to Tyler, Texas, by the way, a city named to honor him. James Polk. While I don't entirely approve of how he did it, overall Polk's biggest accomplishment was acquiring more territory for the United States than any other president in history. Kind of a big deal. First, through carrying out the annexation of Texas. Next, through aggressively getting the United States involved in a war with Mexico that got the country all of this out here, and finally negotiating a treaty with Great Britain to secure Oregon territory. Sea to shining sea indeed.
Polk was also the subject of They Might Be Giants' most underappreciated song.
Well, I mean, I wrote a song about Polk too, you know. I wrote a song about all the presidents. Zachary Taylor. I would argue that Taylor's biggest accomplishment was making sure California would be admitted to the Union as a free state. Although he was a slave owner himself, he was against the expansion of slavery out west. And as more and more Southerners threatened to leave the Union over the issue of slavery, he increasingly sided with the anti-slavery Northerners during his presidency. Because of him, California skipped over becoming a federal territory because he knew otherwise Congress would just endlessly fight about whether or not slavery should be legal there. Millard Fillmore. Fillmore and his Secretary of State, Daniel Webster, organized and sent out the Perry Expedition, which opened relations between Japan and the outside world. The expedition ultimately led to an end to Japan's 220-year-old policy of isolation. Not only did it lead to diplomatic relations between Japan and the United States, but it also led to diplomatic relations with Japan and most of Europe. Franklin Pierce. How about the Gadsden Purchase?
Why haven't you done any jokes about the Gadsden Purchase?
Pierce arranged for it to be bought from Mexico for a fairly cheap price, and it provided a great strip of land to build a transcontinental railroad while also resolving border disputes that had been ongoing.
You gotta be able to laugh at the Gadsden Purchase. I mean, it's what life's all about.
Maybe that's what your life's about, but I don't see what's so funny about a 150-year-old land tree.
Just look at all the comedic possibilities. I mean, you got Franklin Pierce, hello, James Gadsden, not to mention topographical issues regarding the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. I mean, the jokes practically write themselves.
Today, 1.8 million Americans live in that area, and it remains an important part of the country. Although I must give a shout out to Pierce for aggressively lowering tariffs, and thus lowering the cost of doing business and making stuff cheaper for consumers. James Buchanan. There weren't many accomplishments, but I think Buchanan's biggest was establishing more federal control over Utah territory in what became known as the Utah War. I still think Brigham Young was the worst governor in American history, and it was ultimately a good thing that Buchanan got him out of there.
And Buchanan was the only president not to be married. That's gotta be an accomplishment, right?
That's definitely an accomplishment. I love Mrs. B. Abraham Lincoln. Keeping the country together? Hello? In addition to preserving the Union with his leadership during the Civil War, I'd say Lincoln's biggest accomplishment was ending slavery. first, with his Emancipation Proclamation, and second, with everything he was able to do behind the scenes to get the 13th Amendment passed, as seen in the wonderful film named The 13th Amendment. Lincoln.
Hey, Lincoln also accomplished being the tallest president at 6'4", without the hat even. Oh, and he's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Fun facts. Andrew Johnson. Again, not many accomplishments during Johnson's presidency either, but I suppose give him credit for the purchase of Alaska from Russia. In my opinion, it was another great bargain that benefited the United States long term. Ulysses Grant. Grant actually had quite a bit of accomplishments while he was president, but I say his efforts to help African Americans remain at the top. His push for the passing of the 15th Amendment, his signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1875, and his success hunting down and prosecuting members of the KKK during Reconstruction make him one of the strongest allies of African Americans during the 1800s. Rutherford Hayes. Hayes' biggest accomplishment was getting the ball rolling with civil service reform. Instead of giving federal jobs to his political supporters, he had a policy of giving them jobs based on whether or not they were, wait for it now, qualified. And when Congress was slow to act on civil service reform, Hayes issued an executive order that prohibited federal office holders from having to make campaign contributions or being politically active in order to work in the federal government. James Garfield. He was only in office for a few months, but still, he took what Hayes did with civil service reform and cranked it up to 11. Even though it became a law after his assassination, I'd argue the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act was mostly because of him. Chester Arthur. Arthur is a big reason why the United States Navy became a lot stronger. Since the Civil War, American naval power had dramatically declined, but Arthur almost single-handedly reversed that trend. Grover Cleveland. I think Cleveland's biggest accomplishment was related to not what he did do, but what he didn't do. He weakened the power of the presidency. I think that's a good thing. Time and time again throughout his presidency, when many called for him to act, he essentially responded by saying the Constitution didn't allow him to do so. As Commander-in-Chief, when imperialists wanted him to take over Hawaii and Cuba, he resisted. I think this constraint is noble, and you just don't see it with very many American presidents. Benjamin Harrison. Hands down, Harrison's biggest accomplishment was signing the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was the first big law to fight trusts, monopolies, and cartels in order to increase economic competitiveness. William McKinley. Many don't realize this, but McKinley set the stage for the Panama Canal existing. He was very hands-on in the planning process, even though it wouldn't be completed until 13 years after his death. Theodore Roosevelt. There were so many big accomplishments during Teddy's presidency, but I'll go with his influence and signing of both the Federal Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act. Together, those laws have been extremely influential, protecting us as consumers.
He rode a moose.
That he did. William Taft. While Roosevelt is known as the trust-buster president, Taft nearly doubled the number of antitrust lawsuits of Roosevelt, and he did that in just one term. Also, a shout-out to his dollar diplomacy foreign policy, which sought to expand American influence overseas, not through military force, but through economic incentives.
He was so fat he got stuck in a bathtub.
Poor William Howard Taft, always with the memes with the bathtub. Woodrow Wilson. I'm a big fan of Wilson's 14 points, a list of principles he created to influence peace negotiations at the end of World War I. They promoted stuff like free trade, open agreements, democracy around the world, and something known as self-determination, which means people around the world ought to determine who rules over them. Basically, Wilson promoting self-determination was him strongly rejecting imperialism, even though some folks laughed at Wilson's 14 points at the time, calling them too, quote, idealistic. Today, they are mainstream ideals, which ultimately are a big reason why the United Nations exists.
All right. Real talk here. Woodrow Wilson's 14 points were a very good set of ideas. And if more of them had actually gone into the Treaty of Versailles, maybe no World War II.
Warren Harding. Harding signed the Budget and Accounting Act of 1921, which created the country's first formal budgeting process and put the president in charge of budget planning. I'm sorry, Harding, that was kind of boring for you. Calvin Coolidge. I think Coolidge's biggest accomplishment was signing the Indian Citizenship Act, which recognized that any person born in the United States was a citizen. It was passed after, for years, courts had not recognized Native Americans as citizens and therefore not protected by the U.S. Constitution. Herbert Hoover. I just don't know. Hoover's not giving me much to work with, okay? I guess the 3 Supreme Court justices he nominated, Charles Evans Hughes, Owen Roberts, and Benjamin Cardozo, they were all pretty good, so kudos to that. Franklin Roosevelt. Obviously, FDR had so many big accomplishments, so it is really difficult for me to pick just one, but I guess I'll go with his signing of the Social Security Act, which created the Social Security program that so many Americans seem to take for granted today. Over time, it has led to a dramatic decline in poverty among the elderly. Overall, you can't deny his effective leadership during the Great Depression and World War II. He really did help us get through some dark times.
FDR's New Deal definitely changed Americans' relationship with their government. Really, before that, people didn't really expect aid from their government. But ever since the New Deal, people have come to expect it.
Harry Truman. The Marshall Plan, for real. The Truman administration transferred more than $115 billion in today's money to European countries devastated by World War II. Its goals were not only to rebuild war-torn regions, but also to remove trade barriers, modernize industry, restore European prosperity, and prevent the spread of communism. And I'd argue it was one of the most effective programs ever implemented by the United States government in history.
Here's something to think about. The Marshall Plan really helped economically rebuild Germany and Japan. Now, if the Marshall Plan hadn't taken place, would we have had a World War III?
Dwight Eisenhower. I think Eisenhower's biggest accomplishment was his massive role in the creation of the interstate highway system. I got a whole video here about the interstate highway system. If you want to learn more, you can watch it later, but stick around. We have more presidents to learn about here. What? You didn't know there were other presidents after Eisenhower? Didn't your mother ever tell you about the other presidents after Eisenhower? John F. Kennedy. Well, you could say avoiding World War III with his handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis, but I'll go with his civil rights efforts. Before his death, JFK proposed a huge civil rights bill that ultimately became the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Oh, and a shout out to the Peace Corps, which JFK established. It's a wonderful program that really helps so many people out. Lyndon Johnson. LBJ also got a lot done while he was president, especially with civil rights, but I'm going to go with him signing the Social Security Amendments of 1965, which created both Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare is a health insurance program that provides cheap coverage for the elderly, while Medicare is a health insurance program that provides cheap coverage for those with lower income. Both programs have helped tens of millions of Americans have access to quality health care who otherwise would not have access. Both programs have also led to healthcare innovation and increased medical standards. Richard Nixon. Nixon's policy of détente, or a more flexible policy of negotiation to ease relations with both the Soviet Union and China during the Cold War, was brilliant. I actually think it was the most effective thing any president had done up to that point to set the stage for the Cold War coming to an end. Also, did you know that all the moon landings happened when Nixon was in office? I always forget about that.
Now, whether you like the way it ended or not, it is notable that America's involvement in Vietnam ended under Nixon.
True. Gerald Ford. How about the Privacy Act of 1974? Ford signed that. It's one of the few laws in American history that even attempts to protect the personal records of Americans from being exploited by the government. Jimmy Carter. I'd say the biggest accomplishment of Carter while he was president is something usually attributed to his successor, Ronald Reagan, the deregulation of several industries. With Carter signing of the Airline Deregulation Act, the Motor Carrier Act, the Staggers Rail Act, and the Depository Institutions Deregulation and Monetary Control Act, he helped make markets become more competitive than arguably most presidents before him. Say what? Ronald Reagan.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Reagan's biggest accomplishment was convincing the world that the Soviet Union was a failed state, and he indeed was a big influence on the fall of the Soviet Union. You can't deny that. His relationship with the Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, was particularly an instrumental part of this. George H.W. Bush. Although you could say the Gulf War was quite a smashing success as far as wars go, I hate to say a war is his biggest accomplishment. So I'll go with Bush's signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, which has led to dramatic improvements regarding access and accommodations to public services and facilities for those with disabilities. This is another law we greatly take for granted today. Bill Clinton. Well, let's keep the laws we take for granted today theme going here with the Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993. Bill Clinton signed that. Well, he did. It makes it so that employers have to provide employees with job-protected, unpaid leave for certain medical and family reasons. In other words, you can't get fired for taking time off to take care of your sick mother, for example. George W. Bush. As many mistakes as Bush Jr. made throughout his presidency, I've never denied that he was a good leader. He was. So his biggest accomplishment? Keeping the country united, determined, focused, and even hopeful after the horrific 9/11 attacks. Sure, things went chaotic and divisive once he made the decision to invade Iraq, but before that, Bush's leadership regarding going after suspected terrorists around the world was phenomenal. Barack Obama. Obamacare, duh. Obama spearheaded and signed a law named after him, but also known as the Affordable Care Act, which dramatically increased the amount of Americans who had health insurance. While the law was far from perfect, most Americans have appreciated it, since it has made it so that health insurance is more affordable to lower-income families, and made it so that health insurance must cover them regardless of pre-existing conditions. I recently learned that there is some evidence that Obamacare has actually helped reduce healthcare costs overall, although the Heritage Foundation found the opposite to be true, so I don't know. The Heritage Foundation, you love them, don't you?
Thanks, Obama.
Donald Trump. Trump's biggest accomplishment was his signing of the First Step Act, one of the biggest criminal justice reform laws in American history. It reformed federal prisons and reversed harsh sentencing laws, and basically just made it less likely for folks to go to federal prison for stupid stuff. Joe Biden. Well, he's only been in office for a year and a half at this point, but I'd say his biggest accomplishment, at least so far, is bringing the troops home from Afghanistan. Now, how it went was obviously a disaster, but at least he had the courage to do it. Remember, though, it's extremely difficult to not be biased one way or the other regarding whoever the current president in office is. And I'm sure one day my opinion will change, of course. So there it is. There was the biggest accomplishments of every American president while they were in office. Thanks to Mr. Terry for hopping in from time to time in this video, and make sure you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. It was nice to have him disagree with me on some of these. I enjoy it when people disagree with me. It gives me an opportunity to change my mind, and I've changed my mind many, many times throughout my life. In fact, as big an accomplishment it was to make this video, I'm probably going to end up remaking it someday, because I disagree with myself in the past all the time. So, still, what an accomplishment this was, making this video. Pat myself on the back, but give yourself a pat on the back as well. You accomplished watching this video. And now it's time for my monthly shout out to all my Patreon supporters who donate at least $15 or more each month to my channel. I value them highly. I'm going to give them a shout out alphabetically, starting with my biggest donors. Thank you, Bill Dowd, Adam Lucky, Alicia Solberg, Andrew B., Anthony Beckett, Asif Ismail, Austin Ciros, Corey Ryman, Dr. Paul J. Lilly, Empty Machine, Kyle Fassbinder, Matt Standish, Neo R14, Nick Everett, Noah Hoff, Oscars Gaming, Owen, Pat Iapicca, Sean Connett, William Roush, Adam Christians, Alex Boral, Andrew Snyder, Carmen, Gail Gerard, Grant Hughes, Ian Driscoll, Elon Capone, Jack L., Jacob Birnbaum, Joe Serrano Lozada, Kit Walker, Haterade, Nelson Guzman, Omar Arizona, Samuel Striz, Society's Basement, Stacy, Steve Bryan, Thomas Oppenheim, Warren Gerard, Waterforks, and Zachary F. Parker. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters, and thank you for watching. What an accomplishment. Alright, so I'm live, and I'm told that I don't need to wear a mask in my own home, so I guess I'll take this off. But yeah, so thank you for joining me this evening, or this afternoon, or morning if you happen to be in a different part of the world. A lot of people have suggested this. Alright, so a lot of people have suggested me making this video. So I am doing it. I am going to go through every presidential election in American history and pretend that I was alive in that election, and I'm going to tell you my opinions on the candidates and say who I would have voted for if I was around at that time. And keep in mind a few conditions here. First of all, that you know, hindsight is 20/20, as they say. So we are pretending like I'm living in that year, and I don't know about what's going to happen in the future. Okay, so I don't know what's going to happen later down the road with Richard Nixon. All right, so keep that in mind as an example. Also, keep in mind that most people throughout all of history are rotten by today's standards. So, like, I just saw a comment, Felix, thank you for the super chat. Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Exactly, George Wallace there, in case you didn't know that famous line. Also, speaking of super chats, I'll take questions, Q&A like I normally do it at the end of the live stream. So stick around for that. This will probably last a couple hours tonight, so I understand if you're coming and going, like no hard feelings. I want to give a shout out to Dylan, who's a longtime supporter of my channel. He was in the chat earlier, and he gave me a donation, and he said he had to go. He was not able to make it, so maybe he can watch the recording later on. I'll keep this up on my channel, and you'll hear that shout out. Okay. Do you like the baby? What's with the baby memes? Thoughts on the baby convertible? It's grand. It's very good. Thank you for that comment, Ale Alva. But anyway, so if you are brand new to my channel, I'm Mr. Beats, and this channel is mostly known for presidential history, like American political history channel, although I do cover most of all of history because I'm interested in most of all of history, except ancient history. I don't do ancient history, mostly modern history. But yeah, I have a geography series that's pretty big. It's my compared series, but for some reason a lot of people always come back to my presidential election videos and my president videos. And I do have songs about all the presidents. I mean, I'm kind of known on YouTube as the president's guy, even though I don't think I'm necessarily any kind of expert or anything. It's just turned out, I like presidential history. So I have got requests to do this type of video, how I would vote in every presidential election in American history. So we're going to go through them chronologically. I did, believe it or not, have to go back and look at my scripts, my notes. I even busted out my book. This is my book that I have available on Amazon if you want to buy it, by the way. I updated it for the 2020 presidential election. Yeah, so it was hard to be objective, but I did the very best I could, just trying to give facts, trying not to spin it too much, although we are all biased. But regardless, it's updated for 2020. I kind of went back and, refer to this, because I haven't memorized every fact about every presidential election in history. I just have not. I try, and so, yeah, some of these may surprise you. I did take a few notes just so I remember what to say, because sometimes I do these and I don't take notes at all, and I just kind of speak off my top of my head, and I probably shouldn't do that. Before we get started on the very first presidential election, 1788 to 1789, oh, Joe Miller, thank you. Literally grinning with joy at seeing this pop up. Hope you have a spectacular evening and cheers. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, this was a long time coming. It's kind of a random time to do it, but why not? A lot of students that are in school, need a little break from studying because you've got another 6 weeks or 7 weeks left of school, and you're like, oh, this is rough. Anyway, a shout out to Noah Brody, who's a viewer of the channel, who's already done this. Also, E Pluribus Unum, the channel E Pluribus Unum, we've been friends for a while on the internet, has also done this over on his channel, so go check those out as well. Oh, Lucas Morris, thank you very much, says Beat 2024. Is that for president, or is that for something else? Or just me being alive in 2024? I hope I'm alive in 2024. I've said before on my live streams, being president myself would be one of the worst jobs ever. I think I would be miserable doing it. Thank you for all those folks I see that have bought the book already. That's amazing. Thank you so much. I did put the link in the description if you're interested. Mrs. Beat has told me that I am bad about promoting myself, so just to remember, I'm on all the social media stuff. I've been trying to be more active on TikTok. So TikTok, check out my TikTok. It's just @IamMrBeats. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, believe it or not. What else? Oh, Cameo. I just started doing Cameo. If you want me to give a shout out to someone, for their birthday or something. I think that's it. Yeah, I don't know. I think those are the main ones. Anyway, so I have a website, IamMrBeat.com, and I have upcoming events, I do a Q&A occasionally on different Discord servers. Oh, I have a Discord. That's the other one I was trying to think of. Check out my Discord server. Okay, this introduction's too long, so let's get into it. And I'll have disclaimers as we go. I have a Reddit as well, yes. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring up everything. I want to make sure it looks alright on your end because I'm a one-man show here trying to produce. But just, again, we're going chronologically with the 1788 to 1789 election, and then we're going to work our way up. Oh, I know what I should say. We're not going to get to modern elections in terms of probably most of your lifetimes. I didn't want to do elections that I actually voted in. So, some of you don't know this, but I am 39 years old, so I'm what you call one of the oldest millennials around. I definitely don't identify with Generation X, so I guess I identify as a millennial, but anyway, the first election I ever voted in was the election of 2000, which was a very exciting election. So for this live stream, I'm not going to reveal who I actually voted for in every presidential election that I've actually voted in. So 2000 through the present, including that wonderful 2020 election. All right. Oh, I'm getting a comment here. Sounds like I'm in a tunnel or echo. I don't know. There's a weird echo. All right. I don't know what's causing that. I guess I could change mine, so that maybe. I was changing the settings and it all sounds like I'm in a tunnel or echo. All right. Don't know why it's doing that, but maybe I can just get rid of the filters. I'll just get rid of the filters here. Maybe that will help. Testing. Is there still an echo now? Because I was messing around with all these new filters, so. Some of you were saying, keep the echo. All right. I fixed it for a minute. Is there an echo now? No? Oh, in the meantime, thank you for Kyle Venturous. Just wanted to say fantastic series, very well researched and entertaining. Thank you very much, Kyle. It's good now. Okay. So we'll keep it as is, and we'll go through these. So the election of 1788 to 1789 lasted over many weeks, because, of course, it took so long to actually just get messages delivered. So the results from local ballot boxes. All right, yeah, well, a little bit of echo will be fine. Okay, so anyway, you all know that George Washington is one of my favorite presidents ever, and in this election, he was running against himself. So it was mostly a battle of who would be the vice president. So I'm also going to share who I would vote for vice president in these early elections. So obviously, I would vote for George Washington, like most everybody agreed with in 1788. So G-dubs all the way. And as far as, there were like, I would say, at least 10 serious contenders in this election to be the vice president. Remember that back then, whoever was vice president would be whoever got second place in terms of the votes. This is before the 12th Amendment. More super chats. Nina Turner, AOC 2024, thank you for the donation. Gyron and Mango, hello Mr. B. Today's my buddy Nate the History fan's birthday. He's a Husker, sympathetic to the Kansas cause, and would appreciate it. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Nate the History fan. Okay, but back to this. So we gotta stay on track here. So, I'd still vote for John Adams. I think John Adams, you know, he was, this is before, remember, knowing what he did as president. And knowing everything he accomplished before this election, very solid choice, okay? Very solid choice. Yeah, I forgot I was going to have a video play here while I was talking here. I was like, why not have this visual going on? So yeah, this was one of the only elections where it was unanimous. All the electoral votes went to George Washington, and sure enough, John Adams did get second place. It was coordinated that way, even though all these people were interested in it, you see on the screen right now. And yeah, that's who I would have voted for. I would have voted for George Washington, John Adams. Okay, so we're going to move on to 1792. All right, 1792 is one of those, it's similar to 1788 to 89 because it's like, okay, everybody still loves George Washington. Everybody still wants him to stick around. Even though George Washington himself is like, I don't want to do this. I want to retire. I want to go back to my plantation and just chill and maybe read some books and go fishing. But he was talked into running for a second term. I would, of course, voted again for George Washington. He didn't have any serious opponents again. Again, though, we had a mix of different choices for vice president. And a new name popped up, a man who was growing in popularity. and that would be the wonderful George Clinton. Not that George Clinton, not the George Clinton, the funkadelic of the, the musician of today. George Clinton here, let's see if I can find him in the video here. There he is. That George Clinton on the right. That's George Clinton. He was an anti-federalist, but also somebody that Federalists respected and got along with. So remember, the two big factions already in 1792 that had developed already were the Federalists, who wanted the federal government to have more power, and the anti-Federalists, who wanted the states to have more power. And so Washington was the glue that held these two factions together, saying, hey, we can compromise Federalists and anti-Federalists. Although Washington leaned Federalist. He never identified that way. He never was involved in a political party. He stayed, he hated political parties. But, in fact, in his farewell address, he said that would be one of the downfalls of the country, or political parties. But regardless, I do like George Clinton. If you ever get a chance, research what he was all about, because he was a good leader, and very well respected, and good ideas as well. All right, so we're going to move on now to. Oh, by the way, John Adams did get reelected as the vice president, so just so you know. 1797. Before we get to 1797, thanks for the super chats. Matthew Peleski, Adam gets too much hate. Yes, the Sedition Act was bad, but he handles the XYZ affair well. Only founding father president not to own slaves. I hear those points a lot, and they are good points, Matthew. Your mom. Thank you for the super chat, your mom. Hey, you should compare mid-sized cities that people may not know about. It'd be very interesting. For example, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Toledo, Ohio. Great suggestion. I have compared two college towns. One that I consider my hometown, Lawrence, Kansas, versus Ames, Iowa. So that's something where they're not even mid-sized. They're even smaller than mid-sized. So yes, I will eventually probably do more of that. Although they probably won't get the views as the other ones do. But oh well, who cares? It's fun to make them. Okay. The election of 1796 was the first truly competitive election here, because now George Washington has said goodbye. I am really retiring this time, and I'm not coming back. I'm hoping to set this precedent of just 2 terms, 8 years in the office, and then everyone else can do the same. And so now there's a bit of a vacuum, although a lot of people think that John Adams is the favorite. John Adams, of course, I do respect him as a founding father. I mean, he wasn't necessarily always around there. He helped Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence. He was mostly doing diplomacy work in Europe in the 1780s. But yeah, as a vice president, very solid. Famously, him and Thomas Jefferson did not get along. They clashed. John Adams became a Federalist, Thomas Jefferson an anti-Federalist, and then soon helping found a brand new political party with his buddy James Madison called the Democratic-Republican Party that was more pro-states' rights, a more decentralized way of governing. So this is a classic already. We're seeing this this big clash of ideas in terms of the role of the federal government. Oh, I got more super chats here. Daniel Fitzpatrick, did Coolidge's lower taxes lead to the Great Depression? That's a complicated question. I don't think, the short answer is no, I don't think so. Regulations is another thing after that, though. Jacob Ryan, thank you so much. No, not that, George Clinton. Hello from South Jersey, but off topic, would you do a bit on J.Q. Adams? I love that he went to Congress after he was president, where many say he got more accomplished. Yes, I would definitely do that. Elijah, thank you. You're a social studies teacher in real life, right? Yes, I am. Why are social studies teachers always so much cooler than the rest of them? Because we just are. What can I say? Mark Irwin, would you support RFK when he ran 68? I'm not going to spoil 68 yet, okay? We'll get to that. And yes, I would make a video about RFK. I will say that I'm also a big fan of Bobby Kennedy for sure. Let's see, I think I'm off. Oh, political talk. Thank you. I have a video idea. Top 10 majority leader Senate in American history. Great idea. Gregory F. says Democrat Republican for life. Ty Halpern says, have you read all the presidential biographies? David McCullough, John Adams is my favorite. I have not read that one, but I've read his biography, of course, about Truman, and I read a bunch of other ones I won't get into now, but okay, we're moving on. Okay, the election of 1796, I vote for TJ. Thomas Jefferson. If I was around in 1796 with George Clinton as his running mate, even though George Clinton refused to run, he absolutely did not campaign, stayed home, was like, what are you doing? I don't want to do this. Stop it. I would still vote for Thomas Jefferson and George Clinton in 1796. Now, Adams was solid. This would be a tough pick for me, but I think that I would have leaned more towards what Jefferson was saying. He had more, I would say, rhetoric that appealed to kind of standing up for the little guy, you know, like anti-elite rhetoric. All right, so that's kind of why I would go that direction for 1796. Okay, we got a really big one coming up here. The election of 1800. Yeah, this one is one of the most important presidential elections in history. The result was pretty much the revolution of 1800, as historians call it. It's pretty insane. All right, before I go through 1800, it looks like I have another super chat, so thank you, Ty, again. Oh, Rear3, is it true that your main account is in Facebook? Ask everyone to hold super chats till the end. Matthew says, yes, hold super chats to the end, please, so we can get through these. But I do appreciate the support, though. Okay, it's amazing. Hank Flyer, yes, you should run for president in 2024, because why not? I would not want to, but that's really flattering that you would say that. That's, speaking of not wanting to, George Clinton, that's part of the appeal why I keep coming back to him. That's why, like, he refused to run in 1796. I tend to be biased towards candidates who are unwillingly thrown into it, because, like, that shows to me that they are not primarily driven by their ego, that, like, you know, they think other things are more important, because a lot of, you'll see that looking at the psychology of many presidents in American history, there's a lot of ego involved with many of them. Anyway, before I get off track too much, the election of 1800, so we had a rematch of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. John Adams won that election in 1796, and he had a very controversial presidency, mainly with the Alien and Sedition Acts, but he did some things right, like somebody in the chat mentioned the XYZ affair. Like, he kind of still helped the Federalists and Anti-Federalists he compromised on some things. But yeah, I would vote for Thomas Jefferson again in 1800. This time, though, I would vote for the second place person to be not Aaron Burr, who you see on the screen right now. I am not a fan of Aaron Burr. I think he was pretty horrible in many ways. Not just the fact that he killed Alexander Hamilton, but no, Charles Cotesworth Pinckney is who I would have recommended be the. I don't know if there's a picture on him here. Maybe I'll just Google him. Oh, wait, is that him? Yeah, there, the lower right-hand corner there. That's Charles Cotesworth Pinckney. I thought that he was a good leader. I thought he would have made a fine vice president with Thomas Jefferson. And as you all know, Thomas Jefferson did win the election of 1800. And so I would have been happy. Not necessarily that happy with Aaron Burr. Actually, pretty upset about Aaron Burr and a little scared that he almost got the presidency if it weren't for Congress stepping in and fixing that. So thank you, Congress, for that. But people forget how close it was, how close Aaron Burr came to be the president in 1800. All right, so I'm going to move on to Rebecca Larson. Thank you. Can you ask us who we would vote for? Yeah, absolutely. As we're going through...
Michigan Avenue. Broderick died at the hospital. Hudgens is facing a felony charge of operating a vehicle while impaired by alcohol causing death. In one misdemeanor count, each moving violation causing death in person under 21 with a blood alcohol content of 0.02 to 0.07%. Police say speed was also a factor in the crash. Hudgens' driver's license has been suspended and he is no longer a student at WMU. Now, operating a vehicle while under the influence causing death carries a maximum sentence of 15 years in prison. Now, we do anticipate this trial to begin this afternoon, but of course we will keep you updated both on air and online with the latest details. In Kalamazoo, Autumn Pitcher, News Channel 3.
All right, thank you, Autumn. New at noon, Southwest Airlines grounding flights nationwide this morning because of technical issues. The brief pause forcing nearly 1,800 Southwest flights to be delayed.
Now, the Federal Aviation Administration says the airline had a technical issue with one of their internal systems. The pause has since been lifted, and a spokesperson for the company also apologized for the delays. This all coming just a few months after the airline had a massive meltdown. Operational issues forced Southwest to cancel nearly 17,000 flights between Christmas and New Year's.
Well, the snow is gone, but the cooler temperatures are not, as we give you this live look over Kalamazoo. Meteorologist Jeff Porter joining us with how much warmer we are today. It is progress compared to a really cold Monday. Jeff.
It's a little bit, Kirk, and we'll gladly take it, Kirk. Thank you very much. And our skies are starting to thin out as well, and that no doubt encouraging for your afternoon. But first, we take it to South Haven, and with this live look, it's another afternoon to stay off the pier. Latest buoy heights, wave heights that is, from buoy measurements, in excess of about 5 feet. Tigers are about to play. Now look, they're going to play 2 games